Good morning to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our update video today on now Tropical Storm Alberto. We had potential Tropical Cyclone 1 yesterday. Today it's actually gotten its act much better and has now become officially Tropical Storm Alberto by the National Hurricane Center. So with that being said, let's go over what we have for our first named storm of the hurricane season. Tropical Storm Alberto as of the 10 a.m. Central Daylight Time update. 11 o'clock if you're on the East Coast. 40 miles per hour, 995 millibars of a minimum central pressure. And as we talked about that, being a very low central pressure because of how big the system is, but nonetheless, it was able to organize itself enough that it was able to become official named storm for the hurricane season. And you could see more stats on this, 995 millibars. If you're tracking it, located at 22.2 north and 95 west. So if you have one of those, tracking maps where you place the dots on the map to kind of track the season in real time. I know a lot of people do that, but I don't. But if you do, these are the coordinates. And it is moving west at 9 miles per hour. So there we have it. Tropical Storm Alberto officially in the Atlantic. And then we also have two other areas of disturbed weather. 20% chance off the southeast coast. We talked about this yesterday. It doesn't really look like it's going to do much. And then we have a 30% chance as well, once again, in the Bay of Campeche. And it looks like models are once again doing what Alberto ended up doing, and we might see potentially the chance for something else to occur maybe next week. So we'll have to watch for that. Meanwhile, in the Eastern Pacific, nothing is going on because it is all in the Atlantic right now, and that's officially on the Wikipedia page. If you look at it for the 2024 hurricane season, officially today, as of June 19th, our first storm formed. It is Alberto. And, why am I bringing up Wikipedia? Well, I mean, it's a nice website. It kind of gives you a look at what all the statistics are for the hurricane season with their 2024 hurricane season page. And you can see on the timeline, yep, Alberto is here. So our first named storm of the hurricane season has officially formed. And you can see on satellite as to why. And as I did mention earlier, Alberto really was able to organize itself better after being a very big, very broad storm yesterday. There was really no centralized convection. Not only that, but recon went into the storm this morning, and they also did find a defined, for once, low-level circulation. And obviously, given that, and also convective activity has become much more centralized. Look at these cloud tops. And you can really see how the storm has gotten defined. You could also see it kind of has that shrimp, that kind of curled shrimp look. That's kind of a sort of an internal joke in the hurricane tracking community, but usually when we refer to that shrimp kind of look, it means that the storm is organizing itself. We're starting to see the convection kind of take on a curling shape, which means that the storm is wrapping around. And bottom line, it is concentrating, and it is definitely a more concentrated storm compared to yesterday, where it was a huge gyre-like system in the Gulf. And because of that, today it is now officially designatable and designated as Tropical Storm Alberto. But that does not take away the fact, if we look at the cone, that obviously does not take away the fact, if we look at the wind field, for instance, it is still obviously very huge. But either way, Tropical Storm Alberto, we have it. It's going to move inland over Mexico, probably around tonight into early tomorrow. We'll probably see a landfall in northeastern Mexico as a tropical storm. Definitely by the looks, though, the National Hurricane Center only forecasts this at 45 miles an hour upon landfall. But given that this is rapidly consolidating, and I'll show you towards the end, the Gulf of Mexico is very, very warm, and conditions are definitely favorable over top of this system. I say maybe it is possible that we might see Alberto try to ramp up a little bit before it heads in over Mexico overnight tonight. Maybe we could see this more around 50 to even as much as 60 miles per hour. That's just my opinion, though, but it wouldn't shock me, especially if we have this kind of look. And this really only happened this morning, by the way, that we started to get this really defined satellite look. And you could see there's definitely still some sort of real estate of water for Alberto to work with. So it's possible. It's possible that we might get, something a little bit stronger. Obviously, it'll only remain a tropical storm. There's not that much time left for this to really do much of anything besides that. But as I said, and I'll continue to say this when it regards to Alberto, regardless of whether or not this would get a name, which it now has, and regardless of whether it's going to make where it's going to make landfall, the biggest issue really will lie on because of how widespread this storm still is. It was able to get a defined low-level center, but its impact, its general wind field, and its general influence is still very huge, and you can definitely see that on the wind field represented by the National Hurricane Center, and with that as well, tropical storm warnings remain in effect all the way from, I think, the central Mexican coast all the way to the central Texas coast, basically. And obviously, this large wind field and this large influence is very much reflected in the rainfall, with a moderate chance for potential flash flooding over portions of southern Texas over the next several days. And once again, this storm is going to make landfall in northern Mexico, or roughly, I would even say this is far northeastern Mexico. This is still, I guess, central northern Mexico. And we're still going to see flash flooding potential in southern Texas. And they've already been getting a lot of heavy rain, I believe, as well already. So that's only going to add more to the amount of rain we're going to get in Texas. And I know, as at least from what I heard, that this rain is in some ways much needed for portions of Texas. I think drought conditions, I believe. I'm not sure, but either way, when you have too much of something, obviously it is not that good. And obviously, flash flooding risks, even if it's a lot of rain in an area that is much needed, the risk for flash flooding is still there, and that is definitely going to be a concern for people in southern Texas. Really quickly, though, just want to kind of show the situation as to why we were able to get Alberto this morning. You can really only see it, and I kind of don't like this map for that reason. But if you focus on the southwestern Gulf of Mexico right here, you notice in the upper levels, the wind shear was definitely very light. Besides the fact that, the storm had very warm sea surface temperatures, this is also situated over an upper level anticyclone, meaning there's a lot of outflow over this system, and that helped to work in its favor. And really, the wind shear was actually never really the biggest issue with this storm. I think it was mainly because of how big it was that it wasn't able to concentrate entirely, because it had moisture stretched out across the entire system, and there really wasn't able to be any deep convection that was able to fire over a centralized area up until this morning. And now we're seeing that now it's concentrating. We're now seeing it really blossom under this low wind shear environment, and it looks like that'll probably last right up until landfall. So we'll probably see once again this storm strengthen. And it's actually very interesting because on the 6Z GFS model, you do notice that they actually did pick up on this. That we obviously have a very large, broad storm still in terms of its overall envelope of vorticity. But you do notice, especially at hour 24, or as you go into the GFS model, as this moves closer towards the Mexican coastline, you notice that the vorticity really does actually try to consolidate as this heads into Mexico. So I guess you could say that the GFS did actually hint on this, but either way, still only has at most a day or so left over water before it moves inland, and then the biggest threat after that will be inland rain and flash flooding after this storm. And then really quickly, you could also see that area of disturbed weather in the Bahamas really obviously not becoming much of a concern anymore for us, because you could see as I move out the GFS into the next 3 or 4 days, moves in over northern Florida as nothing but just an area of vorticity. So fisher interests maybe should watch this for potentially some disturbed area of weather over portions of northern Florida and South Carolina, Georgia, I guess, for later this week. It is still something. It's obviously not going to be a named storm at this point, but it is obviously still some weather that will probably cause a disturbance to somebody, and that is still significant in its own way. But after that, we then move on to the Bay of Campeche. Once again, this is 3 days out. You can see the GFS starting to hint maybe another area of vorticity associated with this Central American gyre moves into the Bay of Campeche. Still a little bit of energy left, although the GFS kind of makes this one a little bit weaker, and then we kind of just see it moving over Mexico quickly. So maybe this second area might not form, but at least one of these systems was able to form and become a named storm. And it's not like we just had this potential tropical system for nothing with all these watches and warnings up. I mean, either way, the impacts were going to be significant, whether or not this Alberto was going to get named or not. But I guess maybe if you weren't as aware of this storm before, maybe now that it has a name, you're more aware of it with Alberto. But either way, after Alberto, it looks like we have another area to watch in the Bay of Campeche. Definitely a little bit weaker though, so may not have as great of a chance to develop. But then after that, as we get towards the next week, we are getting towards the end of June, and before you know it, we'll be turning the page into July, where we'll probably see, again, probably some sort of increase in activity. But you could generally see, especially, I guess, helped by convection, very warm Gulf of Mexico, and I guess this is what really helped aid in its favor in terms of being able to consolidate at the last minute. So there's that for Alberto, and then once again, past Alberto, the Gulf of Mexico still is very much above normal, especially the Gulf. Most areas at least a degree Celsius above normal, and then across the entire Atlantic in general, things remain very warm. And as we get past Alberto now, and as we get towards the end of the month of June and into July, a lot less of our focus will be on the general Western Atlantic. We still look mainly towards the Western Atlantic for formations, but especially this year, as we head into the month of July, I would really start to focus on seeing if we could get some of these robust tropical waves to maybe get going in the MDR. We typically, on average, really only look for those in later July and early August, but given how warm you could definitely see the Atlantic is this year, plus the fact that we're not going to have an El Nino, probably as well. On top of that, we'll be heading towards La Nina as well. We might as well see earlier in July something try to develop in the MDR. It wouldn't shock me. But first, let's get past Alberto, and let's see if we have anything else in June. Really quickly, the next named storm after Alberto is Beryl, so we'll see maybe if the Bay of Campeche with the second chance, maybe that too will produce a named storm. We'll just have to see. But anyways, with that being said, hope you enjoyed today's update. If you did, always encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, share with family and friends as well. If you want people to be aware, and you definitely should make people aware, even though this is only, a weak tropical system, it is still something, and it'll still bring impacts. So it's good to make everybody aware of what those impacts will be, which hopefully we were able to cover to the best that we could today. So with that being said, have a great day, a blessed day, stay safe, peace, love, and kindness to you all, and we will talk again later.